In a valley encircled by towering mountains, the village of Uzalendo stands hidden from the world. The villagers, dressed in colorful traditional garb of flowing fabrics and adorned with beads and cowrie shells, bustle about their daily tasks, finding joy in their missteps. Kwame, a young man with an infectious smile and a heart full of enthusiasm, skips through the village market. He trips on a stone and tumbles into a cart of fruit. The villagers cheer, clapping him on the back for his brilliant mistake. He laughs along with them, his cheeks flushed with pride. Failure in Uzalendo is a badge of honor, and Kwame wears it proudly. Meanwhile, Amara walks in the shadows, keeping her head low. She passes unnoticed, her mind swirling with ideas she can never share. She watches as Kwame, her closest friend, is adored for his blunders, while her own careful planning and knowledge go unspoken. Amara has long lived with the burden of her hidden success, for in Uzalendo, success is seen as a flaw. But all is not well. A drought creeps over the land, drying up the rivers and withering the crops. The village elders, dressed in their elaborate robes and seated upon their high thrones made of carved wood and animal skins, call for action. They task Kwame with solving the problem, encouraging him to make beautiful mistakes that might lead to a solution, or at least a celebration. Amara watches in silence as Kwame stumbles and fails time after time, his efforts yielding no water. But deep within her heart, she knows the answer. She has studied the skies, the patterns of the seasons, and the land beneath their feet. The solution is simple, too simple. If she acts, if she succeeds, she will be cast out. Torn between her love for the village and the fear of rejection, Amara confides in Kwame. She shows him her findings, the maps and diagrams she has hidden away. Kwame, though well-meaning, is conflicted. He doesn't want to betray the village's beliefs, but he cannot ignore the truth in Amara's eyes. As the drought worsens, the villagers grow desperate. Kwame takes the stage at the village council meeting, admitting to his failures. The villagers cheer him on, offering him rewards for his persistence. But in that moment, he turns to the elders and asks, "What if we've been wrong? What if the answer isn't in failing, but in learning?" A hush falls over the village. Elder Yeboah rises, his face unreadable. Kwame's question hangs in the air like a storm cloud, waiting to break. Amara, unable to bear the suffering any longer, steps forward. "I know how to save us," she declares, her voice trembling. "But it means succeeding. It means changing everything." The village holds its breath. In that moment, they must decide whether to cling to the comfort of their traditions or embrace the unknown future that Amara offers. Amara's bold declaration hung in the air like the final drumbeat of a fading song. The village square, once filled with laughter and chatter, was now eerily silent. The weight of her words pressed on the villagers, many of whom had lived their entire lives under the belief that success was something to avoid. In front of her, the village council sat motionless, their stern faces betraying no emotion. Elder Yeboah, gripping his staff of authority, was the first to speak. "Amara," he began, his voice low and steady, "you stand before us, defying the very core of our beliefs. You claim to have found a solution, but do you understand what it means? Success brings danger, stagnation, and pride. We are a people who grow through our errors, not through perfection." Amara's hands trembled slightly, but she took a deep breath and stood her ground. "I know what I'm asking of you," she said. "I know that success is feared here, but we cannot let that fear destroy us. I have spent years studying the land, the skies, and the water beneath our feet. The drought is not a punishment for our failures, it is a natural cycle. I found a way to tap into underground water sources, but it requires precise planning, not trial and error." The crowd murmured in confusion. Some looked uneasy, others curious. Kwame, standing beside Amara, felt torn between his loyalty to his friend and his fear of the unknown. He had always been celebrated for his mistakes, but now, for the first time, he questioned whether his failures had truly helped him or held him back. Elder Yeboah's gaze shifted to Kwame. And you, Kwame, what do you think of all this? You are one of our finest examples of growth through failure. Do you stand with her? Kwame's heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the eyes of the entire village upon him. For so long, he had been content with his mistakes, relishing in the praise and rewards that came with them. But now, as he looked at Amara, her eyes blazing with conviction, he realized that she had been carrying a heavy burden, one he had never fully understood. I don't know, Kwame stammered. I've always believed that failing was the right way, that it made me stronger. But maybe there's more to learn from success than I thought. The crowd gasped, whispers of uncertainty rippling through them. Could Kwame, their cherished master of mistakes, really be questioning the village's most sacred tradition? Amara took a step forward. It's not about abandoning failure, she said, her voice rising with passion. We do learn from our mistakes, but there is also value in learning from success. What I'm offering isn't the end of failure, it's a new beginning for us all. We can still grow, but we don't have to suffer needlessly. Elder Yeboah frowned, tapping his staff against the ground. And what if you are wrong, Amara? What if your success leads to pride and complacency? What if it brings more harm than good? Amara's jaw tightened. I don't claim to be perfect, but I believe in trying. If my solution works, we save the village. If it fails, then I'll accept the consequences. But doing nothing, or continuing to make mistakes without learning from them, will only lead to more suffering. The village elders huddled together, whispering among themselves. After what felt like an eternity, Elder Yeboah raised his hand to silence them. His eyes bore into Amara's. We will allow you to proceed, he said slowly, but under one condition: if you succeed, you will be exiled. You may save the village, but you will no longer belong here. Success has its price. Amara's heart sank. She had known there would be a cost, but hearing the words aloud made the sacrifice all too real. She would be cast out, away from the only home she had ever known. But then she looked around at the village, at the withered crops, the dry riverbed, and the faces of the people she had grown up with. She couldn't let them suffer any longer. I accept, she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the decision. Kwame stepped forward, his face pale. Then I go with her, he said, surprising everyone, including himself. If we are wrong, then we'll fail together. If we are right, then maybe it's time we both learn what success feels like. The village elders exchanged glances, but no one objected. Amara and Kwame stood at the edge of the dry riverbed, the midday sun beating down on them. Amara held the map in her hands, her fingers tracing the lines she had drawn months ago. She pointed to a specific spot near the mountains. There, she said, her voice confident. The underground reservoir lies beneath that rock formation. We'll need to dig, but once we reach it, the water will flow again. Kwame nodded, his heart pounding with anticipation. The villagers had gathered to watch, their faces filled with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Some whispered that this was folly, while others dared to believe in the impossible. Together, Amara and Kwame began to dig. Hours passed, and the sun began to sink behind the mountains. Just as doubt started to creep in, Kwame's shovel hit something hard. Amara crouched down, brushing away the dirt. A faint trickle of water emerged from the ground. The crowd gasped. Slowly, the trickle grew into a stream, and then, with a sudden burst, water erupted from the earth, flowing freely down into the riverbed. The villagers cried out in joy, rushing to the water's edge to drink and bathe in the life-giving stream. Amara watched with a bittersweet smile. She had succeeded, but her time in Uzalendo had come to an end. The next morning, Amara and Kwame stood at the village gates, their belongings packed into simple cloth bundles. The village elders stood by, watching in silence. Elder Yeboah stepped forward. "You have saved us, Amara," he said, his voice heavy with both respect and sorrow. "But as we agreed, you can no longer stay here. You are free to go, but know that you will always be remembered as the one who defied tradition and saved Uzalendo." Amara nodded, her heart aching. She looked at Kwame, who smiled at her reassuringly. Together, they turned and walked away from the village, their footsteps carrying them toward an uncertain future. As they left, the villagers watched in awe, unsure of what the future would hold. But in their hearts, they knew that things would never be the same. Amara and Kwame had opened a door that could never be closed, a door to a world where success and failure could coexist. Amara and Kwame walked in silence, the path behind them fading as they ventured further into the unknown. The weight of leaving Uzalendo, of leaving everything they knew, pressed heavily on them both, but neither looked back. Amara's heart was conflicted. Though she had saved her village, she was now an outsider, and the future ahead was uncertain. As they journeyed deeper into the wilderness, the landscape began to change. The lush greenery of Uzalendo was replaced by a rugged terrain, with towering acacia trees dotting the horizon and thorny bushes scraping against their legs. The air was dry, but not without the promise of new possibilities. "Where do we go now?" Kwame asked, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was a hint of fear underneath. Amara paused for a moment, scanning the landscape. In the distance, she saw a mountain range rising against the golden sky. "To the mountains," she said, pointing ahead. "I've heard stories of a village there, a place where people are free to succeed, but also free to fail. Maybe that's where we belong now." Kwame nodded, trusting her as he always had. Though he was still uncertain about leaving the comfort of Uzalendo's traditions, something inside him stirred, a quiet excitement about what lay ahead. As they journeyed for days, the landscape gradually softened. The rugged wilderness gave way to fertile valleys, where wildflowers bloomed in brilliant hues of red and yellow. Birds with iridescent feathers flitted between trees, singing songs that lifted their spirits. The air grew cooler as they approached the mountains, a welcome relief from the dry heat of the plains. One evening, as they camped beside a small stream, Kwame sat staring into the fire, his thoughts far away. "Do you ever think about going back?" he asked Amara. She looked up from where she sat, tending to the map she had drawn, charting their course. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I know I can't. Not now. Uzalendo isn't the same anymore, and neither are we." Kwame nodded, his brow furrowed. "I miss the village. The mistakes, the celebrations, it's all I've ever known. But I've learned something out here, too. I've learned that maybe there's more to life than failure. Maybe success doesn't have to be feared." Amara smiled softly. "That's what I've been hoping for. Success doesn't have to be an enemy. It can be a friend, if we let it." The next day, as they climbed higher into the mountains, they encountered their first sign of civilization, a small village nestled in a valley. Smoke rose from the chimneys of mud brick houses, and the sound of laughter echoed through the hills. The village was vibrant, unlike anything they had ever seen in Uzalendo. It was alive with both chaos and harmony, where people openly succeeded and failed without fear. A group of villagers spotted them from a distance and approached with smiles. They were dressed in garments made from brightly dyed fabric, adorned with intricate beadwork and feathers. Their skin was marked with beautiful patterns of white clay, symbols of their history and achievements. "Welcome, travelers," one of them called out, a woman with braided hair and golden earrings that glinted in the sun. "You've come to the village of Ekom, a place where we embrace all journeys, both the successful and the difficult." Kwame and Amara exchanged a glance. This was the place they had been searching for, a place where both failure and success were honored, where learning from both was encouraged. The villagers welcomed them warmly, offering food, drink, and stories of their own journeys. Amara was fascinated by the balance in this village, a place where people celebrated both their successes and their failures equally. She learned that here, they believed that the two were intertwined, that growth came from both triumphs and mistakes. In Ekwam, they met Nia, a wise elder who had led the village for many years. She was different from Elder Yeboah, where he had seen mistakes as the only path to wisdom. Nia believed that success was just another form of learning. She wore a robe made of deep blue fabric, embroidered with symbols of the sun, moon, and stars, representing balance and harmony. "You've come a long way," Nia said, her voice warm and soothing. "But your journey isn't over. In Ekwam, we honor both failure and success. You will find that they are not so different after all." Kwame and Amara nodded, understanding now what they had been missing in Uzalendo. Here, they could finally be free to learn, free to grow, and free to succeed without fear. Amara and Kwame found a home in Ekwam, a place where they could be themselves, where success and failure were celebrated in equal measure. In time, they became leaders in their own right, teaching others that learning never comes from just one path. Together, they helped the village thrive, and their story became one of hope, balance, and courage. As the years passed, they looked back on Uzalendo not with regret, but with gratitude. Their village had taught them the value of mistakes, but Ekwam had shown them that success could also be a teacher. And in that lesson, they found peace.